Hey everyone, we're going to look at stacks today, do a little bit of a deep dive for you and help a little bit in trying to understand, one, is stacks maybe a new definition of where Bitcoin is going and what it could be used for. So we'll dive into all that good stuff. It's going to be fun. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. Let's get into it. I do want to thank our sponsor, that is iTrust Capital. If you're going after a long-term hold of Bitcoin or other assets out there, iTrust is definitely one of the spots to go into. One of the things I like about iTrust is the asset list. Let's just run down through it real quick. You can kind of see just about everything out there you're most likely interested in. There's probably a few things that could come on, but nice stuff. You've got Solana, Polygon, Polkadot in there, a ton available to you. Cool thing about iTrust is you can use this for both crypto assets, silver, gold, many other aspects of bringing over IRAs from existing and or starting your own from start. So very easy to do. All you have to do is sign up. Use our link below. That's going to give you a $100 funding reward. So it does help the channel out. Make sure and check that out for you guys. Make sure and drop some questions over on the side. We'll try to get to a few of those today. I'm going to go over and kind of hit on a couple of topics with the markets in general. Obviously, we've seen Bitcoin retrace just a little bit. This came in on the summary of Fed minutes. Almost all Fed officials backed the 25 basis points hike in Feb. There is a restrictive policy until inflation hits the 2%. We've heard, Jerome talk about this. Fed sees elevated risk of recession. A few officials backed a 50 basis points hike in February, and then feels like Fed pivot hopes would be around September 22. And I think the scenario here that we've talked about before is whether it's a 25 or a 50 is going to be the big question mark. We haven't necessarily seen a big pullback, in the sense of market urgency, but obviously with Bitcoin tracing at around 24 right now, it's a little bit of activity. Some of that, of course, is happening with all of this notion of what's happening with ordinals. I want to get into this because there is kind of an unsung, I won't call it a hero, but there is kind of an unsung player here that has evolved very quickly because of ordinals, and that is stacks. This is an article that kind of breaks it down a little bit. Bitcoin Layer 2 stacks resumes, even though that's not really what it is, resumes rally with a 15%. This is over the last 24. If you guys are in our mastermind, you probably have seen me doing trades on stacks and getting in and out. We just exited this morning, and it's a nice run. It was great. We're still learning about the sentiment data because we just put this into the CPI stacks. It's brand new. I think it just got listed this week. But there are some cool things here. Stacks is up 132% the last 7 days. The hype was sparked really by the ordinals scenario, which have caused a lot of controversy in the Bitcoin community. We talked about that on the Layer 2 Labs conversation with Paul just the other day. Go back and look at that video because he's definitely an OG and one of what I think is the better developers within the Bitcoin community. He's come on our show a couple of times now, and he has a lot of good points to make. A lot of it centers around culture. I don't want to jump into all of that, but go watch that video because it's a very important video to understand the future of Bitcoin. And then you kind of look at Munib Ali, who is the co-founder of Stacks. He says, wherever you can build on Ethereum, Solana, you can also build on Stacks. Next planned version called Nakamoto version. We're going to see 100% of Bitcoin hash power will determine the finality of Stacks layer. This means that in order to reorganize Stacks blocks, attackers would have to reorganize Bitcoin itself, the layer 1. So pretty intriguing within what the future of Stacks could be. It's also, I think, while we're seeing a lot of move, obviously, with the massive hype. There's now around 35,000 smart contracts running on Bitcoin Layer 2 network, if that's what we're going to call it. The goal is to unlock 500 billion in capital, BTC capital, by enabling basically Bitcoin for a Bitcoin-based DeFi. And basically an SBTC can do it for a Bitcoin DeFi with what Ordinals did for Bitcoin NFTs. So again, there's some theory here around how all this could change the perception, especially around Bitcoin itself. So I don't know if the guys are causing any problems. You good to go? All right, so we're good. So anyway, the point with, if you follow Munib, he really gets into a lot of this on his Twitter account, and I think it's a good one to get into. There's a couple of things in the smart contract itself that I want to kind of highlight Let's go here, stacks for layers. I think that's it. Let's move on down here. Yeah, right here. Yeah. All right, so this is kind of showing the layer for smart contracts. These are the innovations that make it a little bit different and unique. Secured by the hash power of Bitcoin. Trust minimalized, obviously, by the peg mechanism, writing to Bitcoin. And then atomic Bitcoin swaps. This is assets by the addresses. Clarity language. Knowledge of the full Bitcoin state, read from Bitcoin. And then scalable, fast transactions that settle on Bitcoin. So some interesting aspects to it. And I think this is why we're also getting a lot of run on this. If you listen to him talk about this very issue on a quick interview with Coinbase, he talks about the potential for the total addressable market here. Let me play this clip.
Is like roughly $500 billion of a network value, but there are $500 billion of application built on top. If you look at Bitcoin, like this is where this is such an obvious opportunity. It's $1 trillion of network value, but very little applications built on top. In the long run, I just don't see a world where it stays that way. I think there's going to be a ton of value created on top of Bitcoin. Ethereum is like roughly $500 billion of a network value, but there are $500 billion of applications.
Number here is 500 billion in network value. That's huge. You've got $1 billion now in network for Bitcoin with only a few apps versus what we see on Ethereum, which is massive explosion. So the opportunity here is pretty significant of what this might mean. Further in his Twitter, there's a couple of things that he focuses on within this particular thread. Stacks is a Bitcoin L2 for smart contracts, separate ledger, stored outside of Bitcoin L1. Developers can build on it. And just so we're clear, it's not really a layer 2, and there's a little bit of pushback on that. But I think the point is he's getting at is this is what they're transitioning to. Whatever you can build on Ethereum. This was back to the article where they pulled that quote from. Decentralized BTC peg works actively being built. Open source devs unlocking 500 billion of Bitcoin in capital is the goal. And then you've got SBTC that can do it for Bitcoin DeFi, what Ordinals did for Bitcoin NFT. So there again is more utility use case that kind of plays into this. And even though he does say that Stacks compares to Lightning, I would say more that this is kind of a head-to-head. Lightning and Stacks are complementary, though I think this is probably just someone being political. But Stacks works a lot more like an L2 chain for fully expressive smart contracts. That is true. So with all of that, the key here is that Stacks is, you guys probably remember Stacks. We've talked about this project before. In fact, I think it was probably over a year ago. And it was all built around Citycoins. And this is their, the Citycoin. We have it mainly because it's news here in South Florida because we have a Miami coin. And you can kind of see there's the Miami coin right there. Checking it out, Miami coin. And they've continued to grow here. So that in itself, and many of these municipalities, nation states in some cases, etc., are starting to utilize this in different ways within their own organizations to try to either, one, maximize the use case of Bitcoin or potentially increase utility inside what they're doing. Here's btc.us, which is essentially where you can get your own BTC domain. Think of this like an Unstoppable or an ENS, like an Ethereum name service, but for Bitcoin. All this, again, run on Stacks. So Lightning address integration, etc. And you can register your domain very simply and easily. But we're going to see more and more of this. You guys already know, maybe some of you are on a .eth or a .nft if you're over on Unstoppable. The key here is, again, going to be the potential for digital ID. Stacks, also over 200,000 BTC names registered now, the longest running blockchain name system out there. Remember, this happened before ENS. You've also got wallets that are moving in. This is the Hero wallet on Stacks. And my point is of getting into these is that there's a lot of different platforms, applications, dApps, etc., that are building now that could really play into a very interesting experience. Here is the Rider wallet, and this is Rider ID. I'll just let that reload for a minute, but you can kind of see NFTs use case within Stacks that's integrated into a hardware device. So interesting interesting aspect between it. So you can kind of see a little bit here. Get in and join, and so on. All right, the other one here is Boom, which is also another element. You can make custom NFTs on this. Reward generating NFTs, buy and sell in the marketplace is coming soon. And then you can manage all your Stacks assets. So again, this is something I've talked about before, is the potential for mainstream, or any adoption, I should say mainstream within crypto, is going to be ease of use and some sort of onboarding tool. And again, these kinds of tools will make it easier for Ordinals to become a thing. Further into this just kind of shows you a little bit about how easy it is to create an Ordinal or an inscription and use pretty much anything out there. This, of course, is Gamma.io, which is where you can set up your Ordinals. Pretty simple and easy, just to give you an example of some of the things that are happening out there on console, which is, again, more Ordinals, marketplaces that are really starting to play into this, community starting to be built around this. Here's Satoshiables, which is one of the biggest, I think it is the biggest right now. And again, this one is on Stacks, all tied into it. We showed this the other day too, and it's a very interesting platform. Plus, if you look at just the Stacks on-chain data, let's go over here a little bit. You can kind of see just, continued contracts deployed, climbing, cumulative transactions. Everything's up in movement. So the question will be whether or not Stacks starts to slow down. Is this a fad? Is this something that changes the very nature of how Bitcoin is going to be looked at in the future? And do we have something that potentially may start moving into side chains? This is something that Paul and I talked about with Layer 2 Labs, because that's their big claim to fame is sidechain potential capability. So just pretty interesting. Here's Lightning on the capacity, network capacity, etc. Not a lot of growth as much, versus what we've seen with Stacks. So could Stacks be kind of taking this new component? Now Lightning, of course, completely different, but this just shows some of the collections, Satoshiables in there, BNS, etc. Some of those. Love to get you guys' feedback. First of all, have you purchased or have you put Stacks in your bag? I'm just kind of curious whether or not you're doing that. And if you have, are you looking at this on a very short term, high risk hold, or is this something you think maybe changes Bitcoin as a whole? Love to get you guys' feedback there. Just as you guys can go always over to Dune, and you can kind of see some Ordinals activity. Again, good movement right here on Ordinals by type. You look at the overall inscriptions by fee rate. Here's, of course, the spending per block. All of this is moving up. And then right there is size of Bitcoin block size, and then the amount of storage used by inscriptions also going up. Everything very interesting. And then, of course, the taproot utilization obviously has skyrocketed, which is essentially what was the gateway into utilizing the blockchain for this use case. Here's Muneeb jumping back in. He says, we have approximately 13 years before newly minted Bitcoin starts to become a relatively small incentive for miners. This is a good argument, too. It's a 10-year runway to develop a robust BTC or Bitcoin fee market. Ordinals activity from Bitcoin layers give clear path for long-term Bitcoin security. Simply what they're saying is, though there is an end in sight for miners, the potential for other utility aspects could give Bitcoin an even longer lifespan. And obviously, because miners at the end of the day, they just want to make fees, whether they're completing a block or doing something else in the utility scope of Bitcoin. So that will be the scenario. But this also gets into the the very basis of, is Bitcoin changeable? And if it is, what is Bitcoin really for? And I know these are huge questions, and this is something that we've seen, kind of develop over the past 3 to 5 years, I would say, over the past 2 bull runs and the 2 cycles, that really ask that question. A lot of people have kind of blamed that on culture. Here's Reese kind of going in a little bit here on, Bitcoin is already way too early. Dev's community, he's talking a lot about where this might go once a block subsides, reduced, relying on number, go up. This is kind of the security to be maintained. A lot of people, if you think about where this scenario might play into it, and his third tweet here is Bitcoin, if Bitcoin's main use case is a store of value, this would assume not a lot of transaction, therefore not a lot of fees. So that eventually kind of hits back in on the whole scenario where ordinals have kind of changed that whole situation. So it's still new, and we don't know if this is going to hold up as a solid use case. That I would agree with that. It's still going to be something, but here's crypto fees. This is an example. Bitcoin's still only. I mean, look at Ethereum compared to Bitcoin right there. This is on overall fees collected based on the blockchain. So eventually, this is going to be a scenario where it does pay for this kind of utility playing into it. Last couple of things here. This is where they're kind of talking about where this can make Stacks basically a multi-billion-dollar token. This is true. There are some things here that if this does hold the position, it would make this would kind of create, I think, almost a new ecosystem out there for investment around Bitcoin, especially through something like kind of like Lightning, but Lightning doesn't have a token. Where Stacks does, so that in itself is unique. The coming together of NFTs in the Bitcoin network brings more security, transparency, traceability. Stacks' ability to leverage blockchain security for settlement of transactions positions to the network well for developing Bitcoin decentralized finance would be a huge move. So again, love to get your feedback on it. If you guys think this is something that is going to stay around for quite a while, just to look at the charts real quick. By the way, we have a new degen in our studio in the crypto pit. I'm not looking at him right now. But he got a chance to jump in on Matic, made a nice run. So congrats to a new degen that has entered the crowd. Welcome to the crypto pit. Now let's get over to Stacks and see what everybody else did. If you take a look at Stacks, as I said, we just put it into our CPI. And of course, for a little bit of reason, we don't have a lot of data on this. This is the daily right here. Obviously on that green candle kind of spiking up there to around almost 90 cents today. So we saw some action. As I said, if you were following me on the mastermind, I've already done a sale on this one, but it is something that we play in with a lot of these new entries like this all the time. These are high risk that we do not recommend investing in because we don't give investment advice. But I play with them, and these are the things that we research and that we look at on a sentiment basis, for sure. All right, so let's jump over to a poll if we have one. Let's see if we can get one. Up, will Stacks continue to rally due to the NFT going? Yes, it's over, 57%. Okay. Some saying it's not over. So this is kind of split too. Still maybe a quick fad. We'll see. In 30 days, we'll know whether or not Ordinals and Stacks are going to hold this position, because it really could open up a new bandwidth for where this may be going. Let's get into a couple of questions. All right, here we go. David coming in. The better return, Sol, Matic, or ADA? Matic. That would be my selection. I feel that my entry point, even though I've exited out of my Matic bags mainly because it was time. You got to take profits. Nobody's crazy. And then Hilldog says, are you stacking Stacks? No, not now. I mean, we just exited today. So does it come back down? Possibly. And then do I do any re-entry? I might play with that again. Again, these are some of these are very high risk. They're degen tokens. So you have to look at that. Also look at the market around what's happening from a macro standpoint, because Bitcoin is affected here. And obviously that would be one that would have some counter effect on what Stacks is doing as well. I think Bitcoin uses, okay, here we go. I think Bitcoin use case should be narrow to a store of value. Leave other, I know, okay, so Web3, this gets back to the whole argument that Saylor makes, that Clipston makes, that, the true Bitcoiners out there, that they do make on an ongoing basis. But at the same time, if we're getting into scenarios like this where basically ordinals were created by essentially almost a nobody, that's not a bad thing, but someone that has not been in the community, and this was created just through Taproot, that to me starts to question the validity of this culture that's been set forth, which gets back to what Paul and I talked with Layer 2 Labs about this, is that maybe sidechains are, because remember in the original documents, the white paper, Satoshi white paper, all of that is actually foreseen. In fact, he even talked about in our most recent video about that ordinals, NFTs on Bitcoin has been done before. The difference is timing and culture, big difference. Crypto Bureau says now that can be done, which is can be done before, just again timing, exploration of possibilities, and innovation will follow. Back to my point, if you start seeing a lot of companies and projects coming in, whether it's wallets, easy use, onboarding, creators, all those kind of things, now it starts burgeoning up like a community that happened within Ethereum. Thanks for the super chat, Scorpio. Just because you could doesn't mean you should. I know it muddies water for Bitcoin, digital gold, store of value. It was the inception, it's meant to be. And that's where I'm split on this, because Bitcoin is still my largest bag, and I think it will always be. I think ETH is now number 2 because of the Polygon exit. But would I hold Polygon over ETH right now? Man, those two just really go neck and neck, because essentially they're kind of the same thing in essence. You got a layer 2 and a layer 1 running out there. What time does Cinema get dropped? So we drop typically 3 times a week, but we score all 5 days. And then if you're in either in our Substack or in our mastermind groups, we'll drop occasionally throughout on different projects that might be moving, because we're pulling data on that, even though we do look for research to be completed before we start dropping everything in terms of the CPI data. All right, guys, I think that's a wrap here. If you are not in the Diamond Circle, make sure and get in. It's very easy. Join the Substack, or you can get in through the website. Either way, the link below will take you to the website, or PBN3. Search that on Google, you'll find us on the Substack. So it's very easy. And the cool thing we've done over there is a podcast. We also drop how-to videos on the CPI. So if you don't want to have to read charts and all that, we drop a few videos every couple of weeks on here's one we're watching, here's why we're watching it, here's how sentiment is. Because most of those kind of scenarios, it's not for these swing traders and things like that, more for like a spot trader that's holding long term. So anyway, if you're not in that, get in. It's very easy and free. If you guys want to reach me, it is out there on Twitter @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.